welcome. In today's video, I'll be making a Regency evening dress using an amalgamation of 3 different patterns. The first being Simplicity S8941, an American Duchess pattern. I'll be using the trained skirt from this pattern. Next up is Folkwear 215 Empire dress. I'll be using the sleeves, back, and side piece. Then finally, for the front bodice pieces, I'll be using a modified version of one of the patterns in Patterns of Fashion 1 by Arnold. And it is this overdress here. This dress, I had only 2.5 yards of fabric, and so that was interesting how that came about, but I think overall it turned into a beautiful dress. So, I hope you enjoy. Here are the 4 pattern pieces that make up the bodice: the front, the side, the back, and the sleeve piece. All these pieces were cut from my fashion fabric, a white dotted Swiss. Here is how the skirt panel looked. The skirt was the length of my underbust to the floor and the full width of my fabric. The depression you see is the front of the skirt, while the peaks on either side are the back of the skirt and will form a little train. There will only be one seam in the skirt, and that will be located in the center back. I used the AD Patterns back skirt panel to draw the curve. I also cut a layer of white linen for my bodice pieces, minus the sleeves, which I wanted to remain sheer. After ironing the pieces, I pinned together the side piece and back piece of the bodice and sewed them together with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. I then ironed the seam allowance of these pieces inwards, trimmed the bottom seam allowance, and pinned the rest in place, thus encasing the raw edge and finishing the seam. I sewed this edge down by hand. After sewing the dart on the front bodice pieces, I attached them to the side pieces and back pieces in a similar manner. 1/2 inch seam allowance and finished with felt seams. Here is the inside of the bodice after those steps had been completed. I then measured a 1/2 inch away from the top of the bodice with friction pens. This edge was ironed inwards, turned under, pinned, and sewed by hand. This is how the neckline looked once finished. To add a little pizzazz, I pinned some 1/2 inch white lace trim to the neckline of the bodice. This was sewn down by hand. Here is how the bodice looked once the trim was secured. I like how you can only see the scallop portion of it. I think it's a really nice detail. Now, since this bodice overlaps itself, one end, in this case the right end, needs to be finished independently of the rest of the bottom of the bodice. I simply turned it under by 1/4 inch, then 1/4 inch again, and secured by hand. Now it was time to tackle the sleeves. Here you see me turning up the hem of the sleeves, which I sewed by machine since it would be covered with trim. I then gathered the top of the sleeves between marks indicated by the pattern. I then pinned a piece of lace as long as my bicep measurement with some ease over the machine sewn line, pleating the sleeve to fit. This was then sewn by machine. After the trim was sewn, I did up the underarm seam of the sleeve using French seams, since the sleeve is sheer. I sewed right sides together, 1/4 inch, trimmed that, then turned the sleeve inside out and sewed another 1/4 inch, thus encasing the raw edge. Here is how the sleeves looked once that was completed. I then attached the sleeves to the bodice, matching notches, and sewed them together using 1/2 inch seam allowance. To finish the raw edge, I sewed a piece of 3/8 inch twill tape over the seam allowance. Here you see me trimming away the excess seam allowance that has poked through and ironing it towards the main body of the bodice, so it won't show through the sheer sleeves. This was finished by hand. Now that the bodice was complete, it was time for the skirt. I pinned together and sewed the back seam of the skirt, and because it was the selvage edge, there was no need for finishing. I then gathered the skirt to the bodice, leaving the overlap we finished earlier free so it could overlap the other side of the bodice. At this point, I cut a 5-inch long slit where the front edge of the bodice was. This will enable me to get the dress on and off. I then ironed the cut edge and finished it with a hand-rolled hem. The rest of the bodice edge got a twill tape finish in a manner similar to that of the arm size. The final step was hemming the skirt. After trying the skirt on, I trimmed it to the proper length and used my new rolled hem foot on my machine to hem the skirt. This was really satisfying to do. As always, everything mentioned in the video and worn in the reveal will be linked below. Thanks for watching!